What is truth, and how do we find truth in a world of deception? Are there biblical truths about our world and our lives that we can trust? And who are the key players in the end times? What does the Bible say about the Middle East, Iran, China, and Russia? And is there proof for what Scripture says? What do recent archaeological exploration tell us about the Bible? Who were the Anunnaki? What are angels, demons, and the Nephilims? Will the Nephilims return? Are there interdimensional beings, and how do they relate to the Bible? Stick around as we dive into Scripture for more answers in this episode of Mission Truth.
Welcome again to another conversation of truth. Now, usually, again, my name is Trevor. This is Nick.
Yep.
You're here watching Mission Truth. We hope you've seen some of our other episodes. And usually what we do is we ask a question, or we don't ask a question. We actually produce a statement that we then say is true on a scale that we have from, and we just numbered it from 5 to 1. 1 being preposterous and 5 being proven as an absolute truth. And of course, as we discover, sometimes getting an absolute truth is very, very difficult in today's world. But today, as I said, we're doing a conversation of truth. And when we do conversations of truth, there's just a topic that has so much information that we need to take a whole episode and kind of focus on it and present all the evidences that are around this particular topic. Now, an episode that we just finished was there evidence? And that was the question, the statement that we provided was there is evidence, worldwide evidence, or evidence for a worldwide flood was the statement that we had. And we are wanting to expound on that statement. We have different theories that we're going to go over, and one in particular that Nick has a special relationship with that he really thinks is the cat's meow. Is the one that we're going to really focus a lot of time on. So we're not going to have a statement on this particular episode, but we're going to be going over a couple of different theories that have been proposed for Noah's flood. And that's kind of what we're focusing on right now. And I'm just going to get started with a couple of different theories that we've talked about before. And one in particular that has actually had a lot of, I guess, acceptance in the past is the Canopy theory. There is trouble with the Canopy theory, but the Canopy theory, I think in its base form, it probably has some validity to it. It might have been part of the whole, but it was basically the Bible says that it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. And there's a lot of, they're saying that there was a canopy that surrounded the earth, and they're taking it from Genesis 1:1 where he separated the waters and saying that it was surrounding the earth, because they said there was, and I have a different theory about that, but I'm not going to get into that in this episode. So they said, I actually think it was probably an ice layer. I don't think it was a water layer. And also it created perfect atmosphere, perfect pressure. And it also says that if you had that kind of protective layer around the earth, then things would grow larger, which of course, when you look at the dinosaurs and any type of fossil, things seem to be much larger than.
There's some fundamental issues with having large animals like some of these brontosauruses, in the fact that they're not able to, number one, bear their own weight, and number two, be able to oxygenate themselves at the current atmospheric oxygen conditions. That's why most of our large animals live in the sea instead of on land. And so the idea is that with this sort of canopy and having higher air pressure, you have more oxygenation. The oxygen is actually being almost forced into your lungs, as opposed to you having to draw it in. You basically just open your mouth and your body's flooded with oxygen. And so the idea that some of these larger animals, particularly like your quote unquote brontosauruses and brachiosauruses and that kind of
stuff,
would have been more suited for that kind of environment than maybe a normal. And it also explains the longer lifespans where you have less radiation causing gene modification and stuff like that. So,
and basically
that's been the draw, I guess I say, to the canopy theory.
Correct. And of course, the theory is that the canopy was broken. I have a theory or it is a theory that the asteroid broke the canopy, because the one thing that is also all around the world is a layer of fungi.
Yeah.
You know, there's a layer all around the world, which they said to believe, you know, when something hit the earth, it sprayed up, covered the earth, it blocked the sun. And that's why you have this layer of fungi all around the world, which is, you know, people think that's where the canopy theory came from, or where that fungi came from, because something hit the earth, caused the sun to be blocked out, and allowed the fungus to grow worldwide. And it would make sense if you had a canopy, something broke that canopy, hit the world, caused an explosion. Yeah. That's the short of the canopy theory. There's a lot of discussion about it. There are a lot of holes in it. Yeah. Because it wouldn't have made, the canopy could not have been big enough to rain for 40 days and 40 nights.
And then you have a problem is, where did the water go?
Yeah. And where did the water go afterwards? Of course, you know, it also says that, and of course the theory is that once it broke the canopy, the asteroid then caused the mountains, the fountains of the deep to erupt, and you had that water as well. But that's the short. There's really not too much other you can talk about with the canopy theory.
So there's a couple of others that are more localized theories, like you mentioned last episode, which was the Black Sea, where the idea that there was some reversal of current from the
Mediterranean Sea,
from the Mediterranean Sea that flooded that whole area. And to someone who only lived in that area, it would look like the whole world was flooded. Right. There's the theories that we talked about with the major rivers, the Euphrates, Tigris, that perhaps they flooded, like there was a massive flood.
And I mean, really, to bring up a point too, because that was the population wasn't worldwide at that point. It was kind of more localized.
It was more localized.
So that's kind of why they think it was a worldwide flood.
I mean, we look at our civilization, evidence we have for civilization, and it centers around, we've talked about this in previous episodes, the Mesopotamian area, which is where the flood narrative sort of begins in most cultures, actually, and then it sort of got passed down as people spread out. Right. There's really not a lot of other major theories.
Not for the flood.
Because science doesn't really see the global flood as a possibility.
Yeah, it doesn't accept it.
And then Christianity, Christian scientists have had somewhat of a difficult time sort of explaining it. Right. Now, I ran across this theory that I'm going to talk about now about 20 years ago. It's a theory proposed by a guy named Walt Brown. And if you look up his name, you'll probably get the wrong Walt Brown. But Walt Brown was a PhD from MIT. He worked, and I don't remember all the specifics of it, but he worked in the Air Force on some of the rocket projects. But he spent a large portion of his adult life looking into the account of the biblical account of the flood, where it talks about on the specific day. It's actually the most accurate day given in the Bible. In other words, it counts it down to a very specific, I think it's on the something day of the 12th month, or I can't remember the name of it. It says the fountains of the deep broke open and it began to rain and the rain fell. And so he took this idea as to say that the water didn't exclusively come from above, but it actually likely came mostly, if not completely, from below the earth, because it had never rained, according to the Bible, on the earth
since creation.
So the idea, he started looking at, well, how do we generate water from up underneath? And he started looking at some of the geological evidence. And what he found is that there's evidence for large amounts of salt water that exists below the crust of the earth. Some of the more recent evidence is they've actually did conductivity studies of the Tibetan Plateau, and the data they're getting back seems to suggest that there's water up underneath the Tibetan Plateau. There's also evidence of other places. Some of these, and JC could probably tell us if we really got down to it, but I think I forget the name of it. Actually, I may have it written down. I do. Ringwood and a ringwoodite is a name of a mineral that's found deep inside the earth that's come up through some volcanic activity, but it's actually impregnated with water, which is very strange. Yeah. So Walt Brown built this theory called the hydroplate theory around this idea. And the basic concept starts with a pre-flood world that effectively the Bible talks about the chambers of the great deep. And so he modeled it as sort of an earth that has a crust that's spread out over basically a bed of water. You can think of it almost like a water bed, but it's not purely water. It's actually sort of like a sponge of rock and water.
Right.
And what happens is that over time, as the earth moves around the sun and the moon moves around the earth, you get this tidal pumping action that happens. So you can think of it as sort of a balloon that's stretched out over the core of the earth that has water between the outer part of the balloon and the core. And then as the moon passes and the sun passes, it stretches because of gravitational pull. And so you get this tidal pumping that happens. And what happens is over time, you get energy that begins to build up due to that thermal and in some cases even chemical energy from the molecules bumping together that begins to create heat and pressure. And at some point, due to something, and he doesn't really go into the specifics of what might have happened. It could have been just the pressure. It could have been a large asteroid that hit and caused, but there was a rip that occurred in this seam. In this skin, and that skin broke open. And then the consequences of some of the stuff that we see happened after that. So you have, I'm going to keep going, but is there anything you want to kind of pull out from that or thoughts on it?
No, I want you to keep going because there's a specific thing I want to talk to you. I haven't gotten into it yet.
So we're going to rewind back to what we talked about at the very end of last episode, this mid-oceanic ridge. What he believes and what the theory says is that mid-oceanic ridge is actually a consequence, and it's actually traces, and you can see it on our, JC's doing an awesome job. You can see it tracing around the world like a seam of a baseball. And what he says what he posits is that this is actually the trace of the tension crack that happened in the Earth's surface when the subterranean
explosion happened.
Yeah,
they released. So I do have a question about this. Does he say in this, when this crack happened, does he believe that there was one landmass?
Yes, we didn't get into that. And that's common within regular scientific theory, is that there's this continent called Pangea within regular science. They believe that the Earth had one large, or at least had a very large landmass together. I think his theory doesn't necessarily say it was just one, but he said, the way he puts it is, he says it was mostly land with several inland seas and rivers.
Right. And so when this crack formed,
so imagine what would happen if you kind of slow down a popping of a balloon, and how it would happen is you would have a puncture, and then you would have a rip that goes in two directions.
Yeah.
And so basically what he says is somewhere, and they're actually able to trace the center point of the crack just by looking. You can look in our, right there below Africa, you see that intersection. That's the intersecting of the two different lines going around the world. So you have this crack that's going around the world in two different directions. And at some point, one of the lines intersects the other and stops, and the other one keeps going. And if you trace them back, you can trace them to a specific spot. I don't remember where the general spot is.
Well, you can see if you start here in the middle of the rift, you can see that it moves all the way around the Earth here, and then this one goes up.
Right. And so the important part about this is because when you look at, there's what we call a balance of force in the steady state. In other words, when the world had before it ripped, the pressure from the rock above was pushing down on the mantle below, and they were equaling forces. So what happens is as the rip occurs, you have a gap, and the rock that's below the gap no longer has a force pushing down on it. So it naturally does what? It springs up. Well, what did we talk about in last last episode about what we saw from the Mid-Atlantic Ridge.
Yeah, it was kind of, you have the
It
mountains.
goes up, but what is it? It's
torn.
not a.
They were torn. You ripped the paper.
It's a tension crack,
Yeah.
not a compression crack. And so what actually happens is, if you can think of the mantle, when it pulls up, it pulls apart and creates these cracks. And those cracks propagate as the tear continues. And that's why we have this continuous rift around the face of the earth. It's actually a scar of the actual breaking of the surface of the earth.
Which would actually make sense.
Yeah.
In a previous episode, we were talking about how the earth is larger. We think it's growing. It's growing in size at the equator. We know that it's kind of bulging out, but it's also wobbling.
Yeah.
So if something like this occurred, it would have definitely created that kind of.
Yeah, because you would have had a reconfigure. And this kind of gets to the second part of it, of the theory, is you have two things happening at one time. First of all, you have this separation of the Earth's crust that's moving away or being pushed. You can imagine it sliding downhill. Well, you have a massive amount of pressure, water coming from the bottom that is eating away at the sides of the continent and throwing water and sediment all up into the air, into the upper atmosphere, and maybe even possibly ejecting it into space.
Yeah.
At the same time, because these continents still have lubricating water up underneath them, because the only part of the water that's gone is the part that's right next to the continents, they begin to slide. You have that up movement in the mantle that causes the mid-oceanic ridge, and then you have the continents begin to slide away from each other.
And this would not have been a slow event.
Yeah, his estimates were that they would have been moving away from each other at 40 miles an hour, which doesn't sound very fast until you think about a whole continent moving away from one another at 40 miles an hour.
That's basically like an aircraft carrier. That's about how fast the top speed of an aircraft carrier is.
So, and the interesting thing is, the Pangea idea came because scientists looked at kind of the general shape of the continents and said, hey, it kind of fits together. But one of the main problems they have is they have to actually change some of the dimensions of some of the continents to get them to fit. But when you actually look at the continental shelves and not the continents themselves, there's a much better fit with the Oceanic Ridge specifically. So what they would have termed is that you wouldn't have seen the current configuration necessarily. You would have seen something together with missing landmass that has been ejected into space. And then you also have this moving of the continents, which as they begin to slow, the front edges of the continents are going to slow faster which is going to cause a piling up of material.
Which creates the compression.
Completes the creation. And if you notice, when you look at the major big mountain ranges, they all occur on the east or the west side of the continents.
Yeah.
So the Rocky Mountains and the Andes,
they're all
the Rocky Mountains and the Andes are all along the western coast.
They're on the western coast. Africa, I know, has theirs is on the east. And actually, it would make sense if you have this line here, then the mountains for the continents that would be going.
Well, Kenya and all that is moving. And so what happens is, as you can imagine, and I'll go back to my thing.
You have the Alps and they're all on the eastern side.
So you have it sliding it in friction, and you see it begin to lift up, right? And so you end up with sharp mountains, and then you end up with these valleys in between. And then you have the mountains on the East Coast, which theoretically could be very old mountains. They could have been the mountains,
the original
mountains. Yeah. One of the things people, I think, don't understand, and I'm just going to throw this in here because I thought about it. If you were to take all the water out of the current globe so that you had just Earth, and if you were to shrink the globe down to the size of a pool ball,
it's smooth,
and then you rub your finger across it, it will feel absolutely smooth.
Yeah.
We think that these are gargantuan numbers, 12 miles, 15 miles difference between the highest point and the lowest point in the ocean. But compared to the size of the world, it's actually almost
smooth,
insignificant.
Which it also brings up another point too, because we'd mentioned this in another episode, where the moon has, it's facing us. It's a static orbit. It's always facing the world, but it has craters from impacts facing us.
Yeah.
So if we had a catastrophic event that threw material into space that was so bad, it hit the moon.
Yeah.
And
he talks about that in his book.
And it probably caused, because we know the moon is moving further away.
We'll talk about some of that in our next episode. We'll get into specific. The other thing I want to point out is this ring of fire that happens in the Pacific. Almost all the volcanic activity on Earth is localized around the ring of fire, which if you take the hydroplate theory, that would be the crash point.
Yeah.
So you would have the material moving away, moving around the globe, and then it begins to crunch up and crumple and creates this massive crush zone around the ring of the Pacific ring, where you have all of these faults and all of this volcanic activity that's still active.
All the plates.
And one of the things I think that poses problems for the acceptance of his theory is this hydroplate theory contradicts, or I wouldn't say contradicts, it's a replacement theory for modern plate tectonics.
Right.
There are some real physics issues with plate tectonics.
Which would change that science.
Yeah. Because plate tectonics models rock as actually as sort of like a very highly viscous fluid that actually has the ability to circulate, which is where we get seafloor spreading, because it basically says that the older rock spreads out and new rock comes up in between. It sort of cycles.
Right.
But you have some real physics problems when, number one, rock doesn't quite, like surface rock doesn't move that way.
Yeah.
Because the pressure wouldn't allow it to, even if, and a lot of the plate tectonic, the specifics of the plate tectonic theory are actually more theoretical than they are actual, like,
because we can't.
Science.
They're saying this is things we can't see. They're assuming that one plate is being moved, and then they're
using sound waves and sonar waves to sort of penetrate the Earth's surface and try to make deductions about what the surface.
And one point I wanted to bring up too, when you were talking about the deep water, the deepest hole that we've ever dug in the world was done by the Russians.
Yeah,
and they had to quit because the pressure got so great. They stopped. It doesn't even touch the depth of the crust.
They found hot salty water when they did
exactly.
When
they got I was going to say, it was at the very bottom. They weren't expecting it, but it was water.
Well, here's the strange one. There's something called the Mohovisic discontinuity. But
I like Moho
the
better.
point is it's the point at which the pressure in the crust is so great that microscopic cracks can't form. In other words, the pressure is so great that it literally seals the rock.
Right.
There should not be water below that boundary, and yet we find evidence of water below that boundary.
Right.
And like I said, next episode is going to be fun because we're going to talk about specific observations that lend credence to this theory. And we're going to talk about stuff on the Earth. We're going to talk about stuff above the Earth. We're going to talk about stuff in space, the moon. There's a lot of stuff. If you're interested, you can go. I can't remember the name of the book. Was In the Beginning. If you look up Walt Brown hydroplate theory, it will take you to his website. He passed away last year, actually, but it is currently his entire book is on the website, and it's been remastered, so to speak. The website's been remastered. The way he's displayed the book.
It's called revised.
It's
called revised.
No, I mean the website has been remastered. Is what I'm saying.
Okay.
In other words,
updated.
It was very 90s.
I got you.
The last time I looked at it, I went back and looked at it a few days ago. It's very much a modern website now. The book has been revised and displays as an actual PDF book now instead of. And it appears that they are about to re-release an actual hard copy of the book, which I'm really excited about because I had the book 20 years ago and I lent it to a friend of mine and never got it back. But luckily it's been online, so I've been able. And
now just to throw with what's going on with the hydroplate theory, and if continents move that quickly, there is a theory that I've shared with you that I have, which would explain it. Very well, in that people have always looked for the Garden of Eden, or Eden as a whole, okay, and they're looking for these 4 rivers and whatever. If things happen as quickly as they did, then God's in control. The worldwide flood, He can easily move Eden away. My theory is that Eden is actually Antarctica.
Okay, we're going to do that. We're going to do that
That'll
in a
be
future episode.
A different episode.
Yes.
Because
this may be one of those that we get down in. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I would be interested to see the evidence that you have.
I have a lot of evidence for that. I also want to get into other evidences of where it could possibly be in the Fertile Crescent as well. Those evidences as well. But if it is as catastrophic as they say it was, there is no way that the world looked the same when they got off that ark.
Before we get out of here, I do want to say this. If you're interested in the hydroplate theory, there's some great references. A guy by the name of Brian Nickel has some good videos on YouTube that go in depth about it. There's also some like 10, 15-minute videos that were produced by, Walt Brown himself, that sort of do a very graphic job of portraying what I tried to do with my voice and my hands. But it was really more about letting you know that it exists and getting you kind of interested in the idea. So you can go and check more of that out. But we're going to do our next episode. We're actually going to talk about some of the actual physical evidence for this theory. And that'll be kind of our wrap up on the hydroplate theory. And then we'll move on to something else, maybe out of the book of Genesis to something else.
Possibly. And I also would encourage you as well. There's another, I guess you could say, documentary. It's called Is Genesis History?
Yep.
And they actually approach some of these same topics, but from a archaeological, geological type of perspective. They don't make any assumptions at all in it. They just go by straight proof. And they're asking a question, is Genesis history? And they're just trying to prove the answer to that question. Now, interestingly enough, in that series, some of the things they discuss actually kind of match with this hydroplate theory that Nick is proposing here. So I would actually encourage you to watch that as well. It's a very interesting piece of documentary work.
Yeah. And one thing I would remind you here is we spend a lot of times telling people what we believe. But our real mission here is to make you aware of things that are out there so that you can go out and that you also have the tools to go out and seek this stuff, seek truth for yourself.
Yep. So
while we have fun talking about 5s and 4s on the scale and stuff, and people get on to us about, that sometimes, but that's okay. We're not here. That's more just for fun and to give you an idea of where we stand. We want you to go out and find this stuff out we want to help you be able to go out and find truth for yourself, but you're going to ultimately have to decide what you believe on your own.
We're just giving perspectives. We are not giving statements. That's why we have the scale, because we're kind of giving you of what we think about that particular statement on a scale, not trying to force anything on you. We're just trying to give you a different perspective. And to be honest with you, it's good to have different perspectives, especially in today's world with social media, trying to put everybody into these same type of corrals where everybody thinks the same. That's not healthy for anyone. You always have to get different perspectives, especially on topics that we're talking about. So as we're closing the episode, I think Nick has put forth like I said, it's interesting. It's his theory. Cat's meow.
Yeah. This is 20 years of,
this is his theory that he believes has a lot of credence.
I think at the very least, it needs to be studied.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to take up the mantle and really go after the meat, because it may not be complete in the way that Walt Brown laid it out, but it might have some clues as to what actually may have happened.
It's just like a case, a police case. There are evidences everywhere. What does it point to? And that's why you have theories. We're not in fact zone here. These are just some very credible theories, in my opinion. Well thought out, have evidences to support them. But you know what? You can't say yay or nay in the case of that particular theory if that's the way it happened. But it gives us a rough idea of how things actually went down. And I think that's more important than anything. So as we end all of our episodes, keep seeking the truth, and the truth will set you free. And we'll see you on the flip side.
See you.